And so I've just got this ground here. Maybe press S to scale it out a little bit. G to grab, middle mouse to constrain to bring it above that grid line. Well, I'm going to press 1 to go into front view. And double right click over here and let's add a torus shape. I will press W a few times. So if we were to press add active, if you're not sure what the shape happens to be, you can always click on your object's physics tab over here in the properties panel, and under rigid body collision, you can see what its shape is set to, and currently it's set to convex hull. So say for instance, we wanted to link a chain together or something here. With this set to convex hull here, if I were to press Alt D, and middle mouse to constrain, bring this over this way, and say press 3 to go into right view, and then R to rotate, control to constrain. So we've got this kind of linked like this. If the collision settings are set to convex hull, which we know wraps around the object nicely, but won't let us handle any inner surfaces here. So if we were to press play here, notice that immediately these are bumped out of each other, because as far as Blender concerned, these are just two solid round objects that are round and thin, and it doesn't really see these holes while the collision setting is set to convex hull. So we would want to select each one, and we could either do that, change the shape here. Of course, it's much easier just to press shape in this menu and switch this to mesh, and do the same thing here, switch this to mesh. Now if we press play, notice that these are now linked together and they're locked into each other. So to keep these from falling, what we could do is go ahead and click on this first one and change its rigid body physics to passive. So we could press add passive and we press play there. Then we just have this one chain link falling without both of them hitting the floor. We could press pause, go back here, press 1 to go into front view. Take this first one, press G to grab, just bring it over a little bit, and press Alt D to do a link duplicate of it. If we press play right now, this chain link is just going to fall, but this one's not. But we want this one to stay still, but not this one, so we could go ahead and click it and press add active, which causes it to move. But if we press back here and press free all to make sure that the simulation is reset and press play, notice it will fall now like a proper chain, which is good. So we can press pause, go back, press 1 to go into front view. And now with this basic setup here, we can shift select both of these, press Alt D to do a link duplicate, which doesn't duplicate the mesh inside of the object, which helps us conserve resources, which is nice. We could Alt D, just do this several times, and then shift select all of these and Alt D to duplicate this like this. And before you know it, we've got a pretty nice looking chain here. So we could press play. Of course, the physics calculation is being crunched in real time, so it's, bogging everything down really slow. But of course, once this is calculated, we'll be able to press back and press play, and Blender won't have to calculate all the collisions. Instead, it will know all the specific numbers to place everything for each frame. So if we press pause and go back now and press play, up to the point where we, stopped it, it's going to have all that physics baked, which will be nice. Of course, if we change something and we need to reset this, we can press free all. Or if we want to go ahead and just bake this ahead of time to a certain number, we can do that. So we could press bake all here. And of course, we have this animation going to 600 frames. So could have avoided having to do such a long bake if we decrease the length of the animation. So I'm not going to let that finish out to 100 because we don't really need it. So I'll just press escape to stop that. But it will be baked to however long 60% is, because it was said 60 on its end. So I'll press pause, go back there. So I think it's a little awkward that the passive chain link is this way. So let's press 1 to go into front view, and R to rotate, control to constrain, and G to grab, and we'll bring it like this. B to do a border select, grab all this here. G to grab. Let's bring this up a bit higher so the chain doesn't hit the floor, and we could go ahead and maybe scale this whole thing down a little bit too, something like this. So now if we press play, we've got this kind of nice little chain swinging here, and with our high def shading activated, looks pretty cool. So we could press pause, go back there. I think what I would like is if this chain were about twice its length. So I'm going to press B to do a border select and select all of these chain links up here and then just press Alt-D to do a linked duplication, which of course lets us use all the same mesh for all these chain links, which is nice. Not only because it conserves resources, but it also means if we were to adjust any of the mesh of any one of these of which we Alt-D duplicated, which was a link duplication, then it would change it for all of them, which is sweet. So for instance, if I were to click on this random one here, press Tab to go into edit mode, press space for face selection, and press Alt select to do a loop selection, and say press E to extrude this, S to scale like that, and then press Tab to go back into object mode. Notice that this has changed for every one of these chain links because they're all using the same mesh because we Alt-D link duplicated them rather than just a regular D to duplicate. So we've got that advantage going on too. But I'm not really feeling that right now, so I'll press Tab to go into edit mode, Control Z to undo those extrusions. When we press Tab to go back into object mode, we see they're all affected, which is nice. Okay, so I'll double click to deselect everything, press play. And now we've got a much nice longer chain here. Of course, it's actually hitting the ground, so maybe we'll knock off a few of those. We'll go ahead and see. We can right click to scrub our timeline back a little bit, and we can see which ones of these we don't need. So I'll go ahead and shift select these down to about here, I think, and I can press X to delete those because we don't need that. Press back, and now I've got this chain to a length that I want. And let's go ahead and add, say, a ball or something to the end of this. So press pause, go back, just right click, click on here, which snaps my cursor to this object. We could say press Shift A under mesh, add a UV sphere here, and scale this up, tap W to give that some smoothing, G to grab, make it something like this. And now we've got this big ball here, although I think that might be a little too close to the ground, but we can adjust that if it is. And then we could press Add Active here, which makes this a part of the physics simulation. Okay, so right now if we press play, our wrecking ball is not attached to our chain, which is not good. So let's make that happen. With the wrecking ball selected, if we press Tab to go into edit mode, let's press 5 to go into top view. What we want to do is rotate this mesh to where we can make a half loop to link these things, but between where the faces would naturally line up. So let's press A to select everything, R to rotate. And so let's get this about like this, and G to grab, and bring this to where this comes up flush with this chain here. So let's shift select these two faces here, E to extrude, something like this. Then what we want to do is do a bridge loop here, but to make sure it works the way we want, let's shift scroll up and shift select these two inner edges here, press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and bring them a little bit this way. What this is going to do is create a little bit of an angle between these two faces, which is what we want. So let's press Shift F to do that. Then we can double tap space to bring up our operator menu, which lets us adjust a tool. Of course, you can get to that same menu down here if you prefer to leave that open, which I don't, takes up too much room. Double tap space to get that back. And what we want to do is increase the number of cuts. And as soon as we do, we'll see this bow out. We would also like to adjust the smoothness here. Maybe the profile factor, make this a little bit thinner like that. Let's see, you don't need too many cuts, I think. How about that? Looks pretty good. Press Tab to go into object mode. Okay, so if we scroll out here and we press play. Whoops, that's not what we want to happen. So first of all, we know that the collision shape of this object needs to be a mesh because it's got this space in here that a convex hull collision shape won't take care of. Only a mesh shape, a full mesh collision testing will take care of. So under shape, with this selected, let's make sure that this is set to mesh. And now if we press play, it's still breaking. That's no good. So if you encounter an instance where things should be working, but it seems like the physics isn't doing what it's supposed to, there's several things you can try. First of all, make sure you try to free the cache to see if that will make it work. Next, you can actually try increasing the total amount of collision testing that's done scene-wide. So over here in our properties panel, in our scene tab here, you have this option rigid body world. which should be active. And under here you have steps per second. That's how many physics checks should be done per second of animation, which is, we have 30 frames per second. So divide 120 by 30, and that's what's being done per frame. And then also solver iterations, basically for each test that's run within that second, how deep should that test go? So you can increase these values, but I find that increasing these values almost never solves the issue you're having in a rigid body simulation. But it's good to know that they're there. Occasionally this will do the trick, but not often. So for instance, we could bump up this solver iteration to 3 times of what it is by entering 30. And if we press play, our ball here still isn't going to connect. So we'll press pause and go back there. So since we know that's not the issue, there's no point in throwing unneeded math into this equation. So let's shut that back down to 10. And I think what we'll probably need is to set up a rigid body constraint, but that's a whole nother beast that we're saving for another tutorial. And we'll also get into using this connect objects button, which sets up a lot of cool rigid body constraints for us automatically. But a quick hack we can do to take care of this now is just to make this ball a bit smaller. So let's press S to scale, bring this in right here. And let's make sure that there's room for this to connect here. So I'll press tab to go into edit mode. And I'm going to press 5 to go into top view. Z to go into wireframe. Shift scroll down for vertex selection. B to do a border select. And select that. Then press space for face selection. Z for solid viewport shading. Alt Shift to add this loop of faces here. And then Alt Shift to add that loop of faces here. Press Z to go into wireframe just to do a quick check to make sure, okay, yep, I got everything selected I want there. Z to go back into solid viewport shading. Then we could just go ahead and scale this out and bring it in a bit. There we go, got a little bit of room around there, that's good. Tab to go back into object mode. Then let's press free all to make sure the cache is reset. Press back, press play. And this time we'll actually get the ball to stay on the loop, which is cool. All right, that's good to know. Press pause, go back here. So what's the point of having a wrecking ball if we don't have something for it to destroy? So I'm going to double right click over here and add a cube. And I'm going to press Shift D, which adds an array modifier to this cube. So if I click over here on my modifiers tab, you can see this array modifier has been added. And I'm actually going to bring the count down to 1. And then I'm going to manually add another array modifier by clicking Add Modifier, selecting Array. And then I want to change this one from being 1 over on the x-axis, as you can see up here, this one is. And instead set this to 0 and then the y value to 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and close these up. And then I'm going to add yet a third one and change this value to 0 and the z value to 1. So basically I have the offset going 1 in the z direction, and then another array modifier with 1 in the y direction, and then the first one with 1 in the x direction. So I could boost that back up to 2. So if I hide the visibility of each of these modifiers, you can see kind of what each one's doing there. Then I can close this up. Now, with all the array modifiers on here I can actually increase all of them all at the same time, their count, that is, this count value here, by just pressing Shift D, which will add an array modifier if there's not already one on there, but if there is one or more, it will just add to each one's count, so we can grow that by pressing Shift D a bunch, and we'll grow it one more time. That should be good. Okay, so I'm going to press 5 to go to top view. G to grab, I'm going to put this on the other side of where the wrecking ball will be coming down. Go ahead, press G to grab and set it flush with the floor here. Go ahead and click on the floor and scale it out, make it a bit bigger. Then I'm going to press Add Active onto this. And right now, if I were to press play, this ball would just come running into all these cubes and just knock it as one single object. But with this array modifier, I've actually added a bunch of cubes. So what I want to do is separate these. So I'm going to press separate. Now I've got all these individual cubes, and I could double click off here to deselect all that. Now if we press back, press play, we've got this sweet animation of this wrecking ball going into our tower of blocks here. One thing to note is that it's going super slow because all of this physics cache is being baked in the live 3D view. But of course, whenever it gets finished, we'll be able to go back and press play and see it at regular speed. Pretty sweet. I'll go ahead and press pause and go back here, press play. Awesome. Real quick before we go, let's talk about mass settings. So you can change the mass of individual objects with this option here. So right now we could say change the mass of our wrecking ball to something super light, such as air. And let's go ahead and press B to do a border select. And let's change all the rest of the chains as well, their mass to air. Now if we press free all to reset the simulation, press play here. You see we're not having much an impact on our stack of cubes here. And of course you've got these nice presets which are realistic representations of the mass of real world objects such as marble, paper, plastic, lead, and what have you. Of course, in your physics tab under the rigid body setting, you can control this mass value specifically rather than using those presets. So for instance, if we click on our wrecking ball and it's right now at 4 and we instead increase it to 100 and press play, you see it's so heavy that it breaks the chain straight off of the lock there and doesn't even make it down, which is no good. So let's press B to do a border select on these chains, and let's increase their mass as well so they can handle that big old ball there. We'll increase them to, say, lead. Now they should be able to handle what the wrecking ball is at. See, whoa, well, yeah, that's, I should say so. They're up to like 13,000, which that's probably too high. And there we have a massive explosion this time. You can see much more carnage than the first ball into the block of cubes than our first go around. Whoa, and there the ball goes flying off because its mass by comparison is so little that it just got yanked off these super heavy chains. So let's go ahead and set them all here, why not? So some of these options you can mass adjust things and some you can't. There is a way to distribute all of the physics settings from one object to other objects, which we'll get into in the next video. But mass is one of the things that you can change for all of them all at once, which is useful. We could go ahead and set all these to maybe not lead, maybe just iron here. Press back, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the wrecking ball part and have the camera follow that, and just by pressing track selected there. And then so we could go ahead and press our tilde key or control up to view this in full screen, and under lights turn ambient on so we can get the same ambient effects as we have in the main 3D view. And we'll just watch this. Nice, here it comes. Boom. Big iron wrecking ball. Whoa. And we'll let it go a second and then watch it again once the computer's had time to crunch all the physics there. Coming back for round 2. Pretty much everything got out of its way the first time though. Let's press back, pause and back, press play, and we can watch it. Nice. Well, that about does it for this video. I hope you've learned a lot of stuff and are able to make some really cool things.